So if we create our own money system, we effectively create our own currency, which in turn it has to be accepted by the current banking structure or system, and whether people give it fair value, and a sovereign nation printing its own money should be accepted for that. And depending on the value exchange rate, you need to convert it to the commonly accepted currency. If that's the US dollar, and say New Zealand was a rich country, while it's borrowing the wealth, it effectively, when it prints its own money, it then would have to, it may devalue its own currency, and so we may not be worth as much on the US dollar, and may not buy, buy only half a Big Mac rather than a whole Big Mac with our kind of $5. So that's just how money is converted on the exchange rate. So really, there's only one currency, and everyone is just equivalent to itself. So yeah, if we printed our money, I think the important part would be actually to become self-sustainable. At the moment, we're a net importer of goods. I think basically on 50-50 balance, I suppose, between import-export. But if we're exporting our goods, we're effectively self-sufficient. We also have to import these goods, and if we can produce or become self-sufficient on a little island and not need inputs from the world, we could get by. But yes, somebody may want to come and take land over. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one really on whether we buy or not. But if we could become self-sufficient, we could eliminate a lot of these issues of needing to buy offshore. But that then limits our owners or the people that actually lend us the money.
Exactly, and I talked to a lady today in the Matrix, and she was a client, and she was from Iran. And we started talking about Iran and the economic situation, and then I talked about Ahmadinejad. She freaked out because she goes, how could you pronounce our president's name? Anyway, we got talking, and I says to her, so what do you think about Ahmadinejad and like how he's not wanting these bankster cronies to go into Iran and take over his country through a banking system? You guys have your own currency. And she says that she likes that to a point, but she says a lot of the resources have been restricted there in Iran due to trade sanctions because they have their own currency. NATO and United Nations and a few other countries don't want to do business with them. And it's quite unfortunate, and she told me that she's missing out on resources that could really help her and her family educate themselves a bit more meaningful. Becoming self-sustainable, I think, is the key, because if we do have our own currency, then we don't want to have any of these trade sanctions hitting us, but if they do, at least we can look after ourselves, eh?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, it's also a matter of perspective and your circle of influence. If you think about, you could become self-sufficient within your own home, within your own family, and have your own garden and self-sufficient there. You could have self-sufficiency within your community. You could be self-sufficient within your own country, which, really is just an imaginary line that humans have created ourselves. But wouldn't it be great if we all kind of established abundance and were able to become self-sufficient as a planet? And I guess resources in different countries. Some countries have different minerals, some countries have different skills, and sharing and trading is part of what kind of makes the whole interdependent body. Just as your body needs blood from the bone marrow, your heart needs to pump it, and your brain needs to regulate certain things. So you need to see that the whole body is a whole, and we're all part of the one. And that, I think, is what that kind of understanding and realisation that we're all one part of it, and it breaks down all the social barriers, bigotries. We're all human beings at the end of the day. We're all the same colour on the inside. So you're really going to break it down to the common level in order to, I guess, create that mentality or that value system that's going to help us. And essentially, the most important thing is I guess, survival. And in order to do that, it's based on human necessities: food, water, health, education. They're the important things, not how much money or what kind of car you drive.
Get the word on your region with the Waikato Times. So the Saturday edition includes a full community Radio Hamilton program listing for the coming week, featuring more than 100 programs by, for and about our community. Plus, catch up on the latest local, national and international news in the Waikato Times, as Waikato as it gets.
You're right there, Oneness. Can you give us your thoughts on the current economic situation, maybe the Eurozone, if you know any info on that, or Greece, what's happening with Greece, and the response, or I call it humanity's social immune system with the occupations happening around the world.
Yeah, I've kept a little abreast of the kind of geopolitics going around the world. I've got a great website I enjoy reading, actually. It's globalresearch.ca. It's the Centre for Research on Globalisation. Got some pretty informative stuff in there. And they basically given updates on the Greece and whatnot, and you can see behind the scenes that that they're independent journalists, that they aren't owned by the mainstream media, which are owned by corporates, which obviously have a hidden agenda. So you can get a relatively independent view on things. And yeah, the Greece crisis is just, I mean, if you think about the money system and countries, we're like sponges. We can only absorb so much, and the debt has got a limited capacity for this. The sponge has a limited capacity to absorb the debt. And when you have so much debt in the economy, and just like New Zealand may one day have, is when you absorb too much debt, you can't absorb any more, and that's when you get the revolts and the crisis, because people can't absorb any more debt, and so that's when you get this breakdown of society and revolt, because people start going hungry and realising the system's not serving them, they are serving the system. So yeah, Greece, you'll see more rioting, you'll see more breakdown of common values and basically infrastructure around the world, and you even see it in New Zealand to an extent, where companies who are focused on profit cut their costs. Telecom, for instance, in terms of trying to get things done cheaply, and XP Network and the major issues they haven't got the breakdowns. I'm even noticing breaking down on my broadband lines, and I guess unless you're reinvesting in that infrastructure, and that takes borrowing, then you've got some issues. So yeah, worldwide, I think there's just too much debt being absorbed, and there's only so much that the world can take, and certain ratios and things have been reached now that mean that there's a bit of a sinking ship there, where you're constantly having to borrowing to pay interest. And the nice thing about the money system is that as soon as somebody gets into a bit of trouble and you're seen as a bit risky, they up the interest rates, and that makes it even harder for someone to survive. So inbuilt into the system is the collapse, really.
It's the hook, line and sinker method, where they throw a line out and they basically reduce the interest rates. Now everyone can go out and start getting credit and buying stuff they don't need, mortgages, and then they start reeling in. And when they start reeling in, they put the interest rates up. So people start losing their houses, foreclosures happen, debt. It's the contract and expand of the economy. These occupations happening right around the world right now are increasing. And I'm glad for one reason that they're still going, and that is that they haven't really got any demands, because I think if they start putting demands out there, then they're basically game over, really, because that's, I think, the biggest card that these occupations have, that the global elites, the banksters, can't do anything about. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the demands, not having a demand, I think has its pros and cons, actually, and it does life's a duality, yin and yang, negative, positive, in and out, day and night, all those kind of things. So yeah, there's positive and negatives both to that, because not having a society that's moving forward, and to an extent, not having a demand makes it difficult for improvement to be had. But in saying that, part of the values that have been created within these Occupy movements, if you've gone and sat down, and they're quite welcoming to go and sit with the Occupy movements, understand what they're about, and instead of judging from the mainstream media, you actually go and talk to these people and see what their real values are. With not having a value, it is hard to kind of move forward, but they're creating a community within this, and they're creating their own systems and collective collaboration and decision making, and how they arrive at decisions, and that's all been formulated now, which is vastly different to how currently the value system is done by money. Is there enough, in the government, for instance, currently they're saying, well, is there enough money to build the roads? Is there enough money to provide or feed the poor? But it's not a question of money, it's a question of resources and the ability to create these things, the innovation and technology, and the people and the intents that we currently have. That's what we currently have, the ability to actually create and feed these people, create infrastructure, create all the things we need. Money is just, again, a social contract. So all these things can be created with the technology we have, with the best of what we know now. And it's, I mean, probably one of the things which should be demanded, I guess, is equality for all. And behind that, it's actually releasing the suppressed technology that would actually create abundance, because the money system is, again, driving the wrong behaviours. Somebody who creates a marvellous invention in their back shed which could create abundance, for example, free energy, he wants to make $1 in order to get ahead, because in this society, no money, no eat. So he goes to the patent office and registers his patent with his marvellous invention, and that raises awareness with the company that perhaps they can then monitor the patent and see that he's going to threaten their livelihood and their benefits, and so they'll take action to limit and suppress that technology, either buy him out, tell him to shut up, or take him out, which is there's plenty of examples of that has happened. So yeah, the suppression of technology is one major thing that I'd love to see released. But again, that's only going to happen. The people, the people in the value system of society, and the politics is just a reflection of society, really. So if all our values internally changed and we all do it individually, we can then influence the political system, which would then release, allow for the regulation and enforcement of these things. That if we were to continue in a representational system, I believe in a meritocracy, and the essence of that, and it's Plato's theory where people get ahead on merit. You don't earn the right to vote just because you turn 18. You earn the right to vote because you can think of solutions to the common problems of society in that time. And the people that make decisions or are about to represent those and make decisions are ones that are educated in their field, they're experts in their field, they're elected by their peers, and they can make decisions around their field or portfolio, if you will, just like the government does. So a Minister of Transport hasn't got there because he's told enough people that he'd do certain things for them and they lobby and pay him money to do it. The Minister of Transport is a systems analyst, he's a scientist, he understands transport, he understands certain things, and then he's elected by his peers. That's meritocracy, and I think democracy is an illusion that actually people go into the voting booth and tick the box once every 4 years and think they've done their bit. Really, it's got to be a collaborative, contributing approach.
If we brought the free energy thing in, would that change the whole game of economics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything that becomes abundant you can't charge for. You don't pay for the air you breathe. How can they charge for abundant energy? And just going back to the history, I guess, of how energy was regulated. Nikola Tesla invented AC/DC, had an alternative system. It was going to create abundant and free energy back in the early 1900s. But JP Morgan, who was financing his deals, wasn't keen to continue supporting that because he realised he couldn't actually control the energy. He wasn't able to charge for it. So I mean, we had this abundant technology and energy a while ago. So effectively, it's creating free energy means that I guess, like the oil, when oil was discovered, previous to oil there was the slave labour, and a barrel of oil might be worth 1,000 slaves, and if you have that barrel of oil doing 1,000 slaves' work, that's what I guess can advance society. And if you have an upgrade from an old fossil fuel, being oil, and you upgrade to abundant and free and clean technology such as free energy, you're going to create a lot more, self-sustaining slaves or labourers, or however you want to put it. So the workforce increases exponentially. Then you can use this energy to create abundance. Your 40-hour week should be reduced down to an 8-hour week, or if any, as technology is advanced and as the workforce increases. So yeah, free energy would certainly create a lot of changes in society. You'd see a decentralisation of the energy companies, and it'd become effectively like the internet. Every little building could produce its own energy and contribute to the grid. And then if you could produce too much, it could be stored or it could be fed back to another part of the grid. And this is how the internet, in essence, kind of works. Jeremy Rifkin talks a lot about this and the future of an empathic society. He's really worth listening to.
2 nanometers is 20 atoms in thickness. And I wondered, what if the answer to some of our biggest problems to be found in the smallest of places, where the difference between what is valuable and what is worthless is merely the addition or subtraction of a few atoms? And what if we could get exquisite control over the essence of energy, the electron? So I started to go around the world finding the best and brightest scientists I could at universities, whose collective discoveries have the chance to take us there, and we formed a company to build on their extraordinary ideas.